Welcome to the What Really Happened radio show. Putting America first, second, and third. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show. It is Wednesday, October 16th, 2013. Middle of the week, hump day, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday, and hopefully another relaxing weekend. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, 800-313-9443. Craig is sitting in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And obviously the top news right now, looking at the TV, is there is or is not or might or may not be a deal to basically get the government operating again and deal with the financial crisis. Huzzah, 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 huzzah. And they're going back and forth, and they're building the drama and the suspense. And it's all theater. And the whole idea is, after all this media-created drama and suspense and this focus on will there be a deal, Americans are expected to breathe a sigh of relief. The crisis is over. Except, of course, there is no actual solution. This deal is just temporary. They're kicking the debt can down the road to the first part of next year. The problems, the fundamental core problems remain. The U.S. government is still $220 trillion in debt and going deeper into debt. The debt ceiling will be raised. They claim only temporarily, but we know from history it will be permanent. And contrary to what Obama claimed, yes, raising the debt ceiling will increase the total government debt your great-great-great-great-grandchildren are expected to pay without complaint, and certainly without their permission, and that is slavery. Now, they've kicked that can just down the road for a few months, and probably part of the thinking there is they're going to grandstand and use this going into next year's elections. Oh, it's the Republicans' fault. It's the Democrats' fault. They're already thinking about their next election, not you, the American people. They've kicked that can down the road so much you can't even recognize it as a can anymore. And, of course, the looting of the American people continues with Obamacare and carbon taxes and anything else they can think of. The Obamacare enrollment system still doesn't work, but if you refuse to sign up, the IRS will fine you. Your children are still dying in wars to force the world to keep the U.S. dollar for all international trade and banking. Your children are still dying in wars to conquer resource-rich nations to force them to sell those resources only for U.S. dollars. We are still being sold into the slavery of the Fed and the IMF and the World Bank. Christine Lagarde must be having orgasms about now. Nothing substantive has really changed. This nation is still careening along the exact same direction towards a global nuclear war to prop up that piece of paper with ink on it. But if you're a loyal American, you will commence celebration mode immediately and ignore the fact that nothing at all has changed regarding the state of the nation. They're still doing the same things that got us into this mess. It's much ado about nothing. It really, really is. Now, a little bit of perspective. The United States government spends $2.5 billion a year maintaining all the national monuments and national parks. Now, much of that money is actually recovered by entrance fees, camping fees, permits, all this other stuff, and shares of the concessions inside the national parks. $2.5 billion a year. And not all of that comes out of the taxpayer pocket. Spending for war is over $660 billion per year. The total development and operating cost for the F-35 fighter is now estimated to be $1.45 trillion. Israel costs an estimated $20 billion every year through direct funding, loan guarantees, loan forgiveness, and other covert assistance. So guess what Obama shut down in the name of controlling costs and spending? And it was all theater. That's all it was. Basically, Obama's maxed out the government credit cards, and all he did was get another credit card to pay the interest on the older credit cards. And that is the very nature of this Ponzi scheme economic system, and nothing that they're talking about today changes the fundamental problems with the nation. It's all window dressing. Will we have income verification for Obamacare? They're tinkering with things. They're rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic is what they're doing on this thing. Now, remember how the corporate media was moaning and groaning about those poor furloughed government workers and how they're suffering so much because we, the American people, will not allow ourselves to go deeper into debt to pay their well-earned salaries, it turns out local credit unions have been offering interest-free loans to furloughed government employees to bridge over the gap. And we know that once the debt ceiling is raised, they're going to get all their back pay. So these people weren't suffering. They got a paid vacation is what they got. But the government's out there trying, we're suffering. No, you're not suffering. Suffering would be Congress being furloughed. Suffering would be the entire White House and the executive branch being furloughed and defunded. The only things that got shut down and defunded were those things that would get the American people panicked into screaming at Congress, raise the debt ceiling, plunge our descendants into unpayable debt. We don't care. We want our goodies now. And, of course, that stunt they pulled by announcing that the November funds for food stamps were not going to be distributed unless the debt ceiling was raised was clearly a political move to stampede the food stamp recipients who are going hungry. Even with the food stamp money, it doesn't last all the way through the month. To get all of them calling Congress and saying, raise the debt ceiling, raise the debt ceiling. I will not vote for you again unless you plunge the nation deeper into debt. So I can feed my family to make up for the job that you guys all encourage to go to other countries. Now, because of this confusion and going back and forth, the global credit rating agency Fitch has put the United States AAA credit rating on Rating Watch Negative. Now, what that means is they're considering downgrading the U.S. rating. We've been hearing that from a lot of ratings agencies. I don't understand how anybody in their right mind could give the United States government a AAA rating right now. But then, of course, don't forget all those Wall Street ratings agencies were giving AAA ratings to those mortgage-backed security bundles, which turned out to be completely fraudulent. And they're saying, and they're running the news, and again, this is more scare tactics. Oh, we might lose the U.S. credit rating. Not our fault, not our problem. Really, the government can't manage its finances. Credit rating should be downgraded. And in any event, they're saying it will take 6 months for a review. In other words, this is just more political theater. We may downgrade the rating, and 6 months from now, it won't even be mentioned again. It's just all propaganda. It's all illusion. Now, there is an important story that is breaking. And John Stadmiller broke this on his show yesterday. And it has to do with Chase Bank, which has sent out notification to their business customers that commencing on November 17th, they will no longer be able to send international wire transfers. You'll no longer be able to wire money from inside the United States to outside the United States. Now, they're saying that you'll still be able to wire money domestically, send and receive domestically, and you'll be able to receive international wire transfers, money coming into the U.S., but they're slamming the door on their customers being able to wire money outside of the United States of America. And they're also imposing limits on cash withdrawals, which looks to me like the banks aren't all that confident this new deal that we're all supposed to break the confetti out for is actually going to accomplish anything, because we know it won't. They're not actually changing anything. They're not dealing with the real problems. They're adjusting the curtains, and maybe they're going to put a new cover on the sofa, and that's about all they're really doing with all this stuff, with high drama and suspense from the corporate media to convince you something important is going on. Well, something important is going on. They're continuing down the same path that got us into this mess, and they're not deviating from that path one iota. And they're trying to sell you the idea that they have accomplished something great and meaningful, deserving of re-election next year. And it absolutely isn't. Now, we're coming up on a commercial break. Going to talk more about the economy when we come on back. And the news is less than stellar. We'll be right back. America, welcome back to the show. And we know that wages and salaries are being driven down by well-paying jobs being offshored, by the glut of immigrant workers being brought in to create a surplus of workers in order to drive wages and salaries down. And when you add in the effects of inflation in terms of real purchasing power, wages and salaries are at pretty much the lowest point in real terms since records began. We're seeing this in the United States. We're seeing it over in Great Britain. Great Britain is in the middle of a food crisis, far worse than here in the United States. The Red Cross is setting up emergency food programs in Great Britain. It's the first time they've done that since, I think, World War II. Because this fascist economic system of private central banking, issuing the public currency as a loan at interest, inevitably draws all the wealth, all the currency, all the money into the pockets of the bankers, and there is not enough in circulation to operate commerce. And they know that's always a problem, but they don't care. They absolutely reject the idea of a public currency as a public utility, which is how the United States was started, where the people collectively owned the money in circulation. Under the Federal Reserve System, even if it's in your pocket, it's not considered your property. It's a loan at interest. So we're seeing this massive food distribution program over in Britain. We got food distribution programs here. Probably everywhere around you there are food distribution programs, trying to keep the nation fed, while all these billions and trillions of dollars are going out to prop up Wall Street and fight all these wars. And again, this proclamation that there's a deal, huzzah, 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 you should be happy. No, we're not. You haven't dealt with the problems. You haven't even looked at the problems. In fact, it's amazing to watch the entire Congress and the President wearing blinders over their eyes saying, I don't see anything beyond, what we're talking about here. It's amazing. Now, getting back over to the NSA. More and more people are beginning to realize the repercussions of the admission that when the head of the NSA claimed to have thwarted some 54 terror plots with their spying on ordinary American citizens, they were fibbing. And we told you up front they're fibbing, because real criminals and real terrorists are not afraid of the NSA, because they have the resources to develop their own encryption methods, and without the method, the NSA can't do a thing. The NSA's ability to spy on all Americans is because Americans are lured into using standard encryption systems where the NSA knows the method and is able to brute force the keys with these supercomputers. They've got acres and acres of supercomputers to break the keys. And in many cases, they don't even have to do that. The encryption systems have back doors built into them. And if you go back and you look at my NSA challenges, and I'm going to reprise that to the top of the main page during the next commercial break, and you look at the long history of the NSA, their prowess at reading private traffic is because they've got back doors into it. And if they don't have a back door and they don't know your method, you are invisible to them. So under cross-examination in congressional hearings, the NSA director, Alexander, said, yeah, actually, no, we didn't. Now they're down to saying they foiled one terror plot. But it turned out that terror plot was really solved with ordinary police work. The NSA isn't chasing the criminals, or they'd be all over Wall Street. The NSA isn't chasing terrorists, or they'd be all over Washington, D.C. The NSA is keeping an eye on you, not to mention their ex-lovers, to keep you in your place. Because you're just an American taxpayer. Your place is down there at the bottom, giving us wealth and breeding us new soldiers and workers. That's where you belong. And they're spying on you to make sure that you stay there and be happy in your work. All of this, of course, is an embarrassment to Dianne Feinstein, who's like out there with her little short skirt and her pom-poms going, go NSA, go NSA. And all of it, of course, is completely unconstitutional. Completely unconstitutional. Now they're expanding the program at a time when we're being told we can't visit our national parks and our monuments and can't feed our poor because of budget restrictions here. The federal government is launching a new program to data mine Twitter for symptoms of depression, so that you will be given your government-mandated SSRIs, or at the very least your identity will be sold to pharmaceutical corporations for targeted marketing. I think this is kind of on the same level as that government-funded study that had shrimp running on a treadmill. We should get some of those shrimp over here to RBN, give that hamster a break. All righty, let's see. We have a caller on the line, Nosium in the Netherlands. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Hello again. And I want to make a few points. And this is very important because the year 1914, they have created the Federal Reserve. And also, in 1914, they created the Israeli Defense Force. So that were two institutions, I can say institutions, that have been created. And
well, I have to interrupt here because the Federal Reserve was actually created in 1913. This is the 100th anniversary this year. And I don't know about an Israeli Israeli Defense Force since Israel itself didn't come into being until 1948.
Yeah, okay. But here's the interesting part. And I don't know if Henry Kissinger said it or another interesting person from our time. So he said, we need a crisis every 100 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we are now at the point exactly in 2013, and we have, when you look at the history and you look at where we are at now, it's the same concept. And but what the elite misses, the interesting part is the technology. And one person also said, I wish internet have never been created.
I think that was Jay Rockefeller.
If you look now at the people, we are now in a new era. You know, a new. It's also a new era for computers and science and technology, and the old fashion. I will say the old fashion is fading away, and you see this. How can you say it? Transformation into a new technological manner. Because I'm coming from the Netherlands. I worked at ESA.
Mm-hmm.
So I know people. We talked about many things about what is coming and how it's going in the future. But I want to say one thing to you. They underestimated the technology future, because people everywhere where you go, everyone, almost everyone in the technology world has mobile phones. So they get always up to date.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So they can choose what they want to choose. That was not 50 years ago. We could dream of that.
Nosium, I am sorry to cut you off, but we have to take a commercial break. I will respond to your comments when we come back from these few words. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And responding to Nosium's comments, yes, indeed, we are seeing a major fundamental transformation of society in this day and age. And I think it is worth noting the extreme parallels between what is happening today and what happened about the time that Gutenberg rediscovered movable type printing. And all of a sudden, books, which had been the exclusive province of the ultra-rich and the nobility and the clergy, were all of a sudden available to ordinary people. Literacy exploded, and it proved a very difficult time for the ruling bodies, who all of a sudden couldn't get away with the lies they had been using to control the masses, like divine right. And we saw those established, entrenched power structures trying to find some way to control printing, trying to ban it, trying to basically keep the lid on the lies. In fact, Gutenberg's Bible led directly to the King James Bible, because all of a sudden people who were learning how to read and reading for themselves and seeing Bibles translated into their own native tongue from Latin were discovering that this church over here was saying one thing and this church over here was saying something completely opposite. And so the entire diverged body of Holy Writ had to be brought back together and synchronized in order to restore faith that it was the revealed word of the imaginary playmate in the clouds. Now we're seeing exactly the same thing going on here. The availability of the internet to the general public, has allowed people to communicate with each other on a mass scale that is not being controlled by the corporate media or governments, and it has made it very difficult. In fact, let's be honest, it's made it impossible for the ruling bodies to lie to us, to control us, to get what they want. Now, 50 years ago, when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, it took almost 30 years to reach the point where half of Americans thought the Warren Report was a cover-up. And these days, the average life expectancy of a government lie can be clocked with an egg timer. And by the way, I noticed Fox News was giving a lot of coverage to, oh, there's a new book coming out about the Kennedy assassination that absolutely destroys all those conspiracy theories. You should buy this book and pay no attention to those bloggers who talk about the absurdity of the magic bullet theory and the House Select Committee on Assassination. So they're still trying to prop up the old lies. And that's a huge burden for this government. Because every incoming government, the first promise they make is, we will preserve, protect, and defend the lies of the previous administration. Because if any of these cover-ups gets blown, and the government and the people realize the scale that they've been lied to in the past, then all of a sudden they get very healthily skeptical about the lies they're being told today, and that's the process that's going on right now. Zbigniew Brzezinski calls it the global political awakening, which sounds like a good thing to me, but to Brzezinski, he thinks it's a bad thing. And that's why you have people like Rockefeller coming out and saying, that Internet should never have been invented. And remember, when the Internet was created by the Defense Department's Advanced Research Projects Agency, it was never intended to be available to the general public. It was originally created strictly for military and government use. Oh, no, we don't want the people to have access to this kind of technology. They may do bad things with it, like tell the truth. But thankfully, society evolves independent of government control and desires and wishes, and the ARPANET became the Internet, and it is changing the fundamental flow of information through society. It's no longer top-down, where the government decreeth, corporate media regurgitate it, and the American people forced to believe it, because now they have an alternative. Absolutely. All right, we got another caller on the line here. Mark in Philadelphia. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Mike. I'd like to ask you, first of all, I appreciate your keen perspective, and I appreciate your daring us to ask the really serious questions. My sense of these things is that we as humankind have been played. We've been gamed to the max. And what I mean by that is that they're what they put in front of us are multiple dramas to keep us occupied, to keep us preoccupied in the Hegelian dialectic of black and white, yes, no, and all this
You're absolutely
division.
right. And with the debt crisis over, they're going to have to start coming up with terror threats and missing blonde children or something else to keep us from paying attention to the NSA spy scandal and the rest of that stuff.
So what I want to ask you is my sense of it is there's multiple layers upon multiple layers of drama and distraction. Mm-hmm. And you're a keen person, you're a smart person, you're technologically oriented, and so I want to ask you, I came across some information. My intuition has been telling me that I had an inkling that something about it. Here's the deal. Is it possible that they have technologies way beyond what you know, and you're pretty informed?
Well, that's a given. As a rule of thumb, and I learned this back when I was involved with Defense Department research, the government likes to keep itself at least 10 to 20 years ahead of what's available on the civilian market. So, yeah, it's a given they've got stuff that we don't know about yet.
So what I want to ask you is what came to me, on all this stuff they're putting in our food or water or air, and then I contemplated this possibility of nanoparticles, and it came to me. It's like, what if these nanoparticles are actually extremely powerful, where they could actually activate them in some way that could be very detrimental to us? And I just came across some information lately where they might actually have nano switches, where if they point an energy or turn on a radio frequency of a certain frequency, that they could activate these switches, and these switches could actually kill us.
Well, let me back off. First of all, nanoparticles is kind of a generic term for various technologies relying on ultra-small scale devices. They're used for medication delivery and so forth. What you're saying, in theory, might be possible, but there's a limiting factor, and that is the size of the nanoparticles themselves, because in order to receive a radio signal, the radio signal has to be of long enough frequency to pass through your human tissues, which makes it far too long to be intercepted by the nanoparticles because of their size. They've got to have at least, a quarter wave length whip antenna to pick that up, and the ultra high frequency radio waves tend not to penetrate. That's the principle behind.
Okay, well, here's the deal. I understand what you're saying, and by the way, I have electronics background, so I can understand maybe better than some. But what if the nanoparticles are actually in our skin, where they don't have to go deep into our body, where they actually reside in our skin, which is an organ of the body?
Okay, well, what would be the point of it? I mean, they don't need nanoparticles in our skin. They've got those portable pain rays, the microwave rays that basically boil the water in your skin tissue.
The point of it is, I came across something yesterday, and you can check it out. Maybe it's total bunk. It's called nano domestic quell. I just came across this nano domestic quell, where they could activate a frequency or an energy beam through a drone or maybe a satellite, I don't know, and it could cause people to have flu-like symptoms, get sick, and within 2 weeks die. That's what I come across. And I'm like,
well, they can do that without nanoparticles. I mean, that's just the reality there. I mean, are you talking about a targeted assassination?
Yeah, targeted, but I'm not talking about a mass target, like a city, a mass population, where they could, and then it would look like a natural event, like a natural,
it's less expensive. It's less expensive and technically challenging to just hit them with a biological weapon, a weaponized version of the flu, which we know they've been playing with. Anyway, listen, we're coming up on the end of the segment here. We know that anything can be possible, but there are often practical considerations. And again, the size of the nanoparticles makes it very unlikely or inefficient for them to intercept any radio waves that could actually penetrate the skin. And if the nanoparticles are on your skin, they vanish with the next shower. Remember, your skin is constantly replacing itself. The epithelial layer is always peeling off, so any nanoparticles you've got on your arm this week are going to be gone by the next week. So there's a practical reason why that wouldn't work. Thank you very much. We're going to switch.
I appreciate it.
We're going to switch over to Fred in Michigan. Aloha, Fred. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Fred, are you there?
Yeah, that was an interesting call. It caused me to think of all the garbage that's in the municipal water supply beyond fluoride and chlorine. But I got to thinking about your term money junkies, and the money junkies have names, they have faces, they have places of business. And so I got to thinking, okay, so we heard about the truckers wanting to do whatever they wanted to do, and of course occupy Wall Street. So I got to thinking, what if we were able to successfully motivate truckers and others, the bicycle people, the motorcycle people,
Fred,
to go and occupy the Federal Reserve base.
Fred. We have to take a break for commercials. Do not hang up, because I want to come back to your phone call after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Fred in Michigan about the Federal Reserve and the private central bank, and there are two issues regarding the idea of a public uprising against the bankers, which I think is an inevitable part of what's going to happen here. Because remember, long before Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette went to the guillotine, the bankers got their haircuts. And that was not just a coincidence. The people of France understood what it was that had plunged them into such despair and poverty, and they dealt with it decisively. Now, that being said, I had an opportunity to visit Wall Street back in 2011 when I was in New York for the 10th anniversary presentation that was put on by World News Network and Lenny Charles. And it was really a lot of fun. But we went over to Wall Street, and if you look carefully at photos, you will see there are barricades built into the streets and sidewalk. They can throw a switch, and boom, the fortifications come up, because they understand that when the people wake up, the people are not going to go after the paid actors at the Congress and the White House who are paid to stand up there and act like they're the ones to blame. The people are going to go after these private central bankers and the money junkies. We're already at a stage right now where the top executives at Goldman Sachs, when they arrive to work, the New York Police Department literally blocks off the entire block so that these guys can roll in their armored limousines and go up in their private elevators. And at the end of the day, they do the same thing again. Block off the streets so it's completely empty of people and cars so that they can leave and go back to their homes. So, yeah, the bankers know that they are a potential target here. Fred?
Wondering, too, is it American taxpayer credit or whatever that possibly paid for the Federal Reserve physical structures in the various locations?
I am presuming, because I don't know for a fact, that the Federal Reserve pays for its own physical plant, but I think it's a valid question if the taxpayers paid for all that extra armor and security around them. Certainly the taxpayers are paying for those New York police officers who are providing armed escort for the heads of Goldman Sachs, and presumably the other large financial manipulators are doing the same thing as well.
And why can't we, Brother Mike, and I thank you for not hanging up on me. I can be disjointed at times, for sure. But every time I recall your presentation about the president of Iceland and what they did to the gangster banksters over there, I'm thinking, well, how could we do that over here? How could we possibly do that over here?
Well, basically what happened in Iceland, and it is a small place, but the entire population of Iceland surrounded their government building and just glared at them, where the government said, okay, we've lost the faith and trust of the people. They're not going to believe any excuses that we give them. And basically that government fell and was replaced. And because our federal government and the Federal Reserve are so tightly intertwined, they're going to have to come down together. And I think if we just sit here and wait, it's going to happen. This deal that they're trumpeting as a cause for celebration and popping champagne corks didn't really change anything at all. It was just more political theater.
You know, some of us who might not mind living off the land, you know, might possibly conjure up the idea of a Peruvian barbecue.
Okay. All righty. Well, you know,
thank you, Mike.
All right, we'll let you go here. We're going to switch over. Apparently, Nosim in the Netherlands called back again. Aloha, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I called back, and I just want to make a statement about someone called Nano. And I just want to say, you got, in the past, you got stethoscopes. And nano is just another word for looking deeper into the material.
Actually, nano is a word.
Nano is just another word for saying telescope. It's just another word for saying telescope. That's all I want to say, and you can elaborate on that, Mike. Thank you for my call.
All right, thank you very much.
Again. Yo.
Nano is basically a word that means extremely tiny. And it comes out of the metric system, where you have kilometers, meters, centimeters, millimeters, and you go on down to nanometers. And that's where the root of that word is. It simply means something very, very tiny. Nanoparticles are any ultramicroscopic construct for whatever purpose it is, delivering targeted drugs and so forth. In fact, they're starting to appear in household products, supposedly to make them more efficient at doing whatever it is they're supposed to do. So nanoparticles is a very generic term. As to whether the technology could be put to nefarious purpose, I'm sure there's some well-funded government program looking into that right now. All righty, so that clears our phone lines right now. Coming up on the top of the hour, the corporate media, in fact, it was just on Fox News here, is basically still trying to spin that the failure of the Obamacare system was because of its intense popularity and so many people are signing up and you've just got to go back and try it over and over again. And the reality is, and we're looking at this article from 21st Century Wire, and it turns out that because they made the change to force you to sign up before you decided on a health care provider, that's what jammed the system. And the reality is that less than half of 1% of all visitors to the Obamacare websites have actually enrolled. Now, the White House is out there proclaiming all the unique visitors who showed up. It proves this thing is a huge success. No, it doesn't. Because knowing that this is a desperate cash grab for $200 billion in tax revenues to dangle before lenders, now that the debt ceiling has been raised, it's a complete and utter failure. People showing up at your website isn't a measure of success. People leaving your website with something of value is your measure of success. And the Washington Post was quite honest in saying this thing is not working because they forced everybody to sign up before they saw how costly these new Obamacare-compliant health insurance packages are, how incredibly high the deductibles are. It's reaping trillions of dollars of profits for the health insurance companies who turn around and pay billions of dollars in taxes to the government. And that's really what it's all about. As I mentioned yesterday on the show, if this government really were concerned about your health, they'd be looking at the toxic adjuvants in vaccines. They'd be looking at the toxic additives in our food. They would certainly be pulling those SSRIs off the market rather than blaming the guns for it. They wouldn't have allowed this fracking epidemic all across our country. They're not concerned about your health. You're just a walking wallet and a breeder of new soldiers and workers to them. And that's entirely what's going on. Real quick, we're going to grab one more phone call. Neil in Florida. Aloha, Neil. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Sorry, I just got home to tune in. I'm going to change the subject real quick. I have a question, if you could bear with me, that I've been wondering, and I don't hear a lot of people touch on. But I think most of us who are awake to what's going on agree there's going to be some sort of significant event in the near future, like a total economic collapse or false flag of some kind, or both, I guess, which will result in parts of the country being put under martial law. And my question to you is, in your opinion, because I haven't been listening for real long, but I've never heard you talk about it, but how successful will the enforcement of the martial law be once the state of this nation reaches that catastrophic level? Because if martial law has to be imposed on a large part of the country, that won't be possible without the help of the municipal, city, and county police departments who, you know, they're made up of human beings who live in the community and have kids and friends and loved ones who also live in the community.
Okay, well, real quick, when they declare martial law, it'll be nationwide because it'll be a national emergency, but whether or not they can carry it through against a population, 80% of whom own firearms and are buying more right now, is problematic. I think what the U.S. government would like to try and engineer is a small, contained, controllable armed revolution with which to justify draconian changes to the state of the nation here. And I think that's what they tried with Kokesh on July 4th. They were trying to get race riots with Zimmerman. Again, they were talking about riots if the EBT money is not forthcoming next month. I don't think this government thinks it can actually succeed in imposing martial law against the entire country. So they're looking to do a little theatrical presentation to convince Americans that if they stand up and fight, they'll be destroyed. We got to take a break for Phyllis Shapley and commercials. We'll be right back with more phone calls. And Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to take another phone call here. Clay in Alabama. Aloha, Clay. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Mike, I live in a county in central Alabama with a population of about 45,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
And a year ago this month, our hospital closed. And the nearest hospital now is about 35 miles away.
Ouch.
And less than a mile from where the hospital's closed, our little rinky-dink airport got some kind of government federal grant, and they did a bunch of work out there which is stopped. I guess they ran out of money. I'm probably as far as they'll ever go, and I'm sure it was more than enough to build a hospital. It's time for everybody to get really mad.
I agree.
I mean,
absolutely
just
agree.
mad. The nearest hospital now is about 35 miles away. And, of course, that hospital was mainly used for, emergency services, Nobody got a heart transplant there or anything like that, but it sure saved some lives, and this is sure going to cost some lives. And I read about this F-35 that Chuck Yeager has said is useless.
Mm-hmm.
Chuck Yeager.
Yep, he's right.
That's what, $150 million a copy, or more than that, maybe?
Oh, it's a lot more than that. I forget the exact. I think it's something like $300 million per unit is the new projected cost.
Yeah, well, that would build a score of state-of-the-art hospitals. Why is our money not being spent on us?
That, of course, is the main question. I mean, that's what I was saying in the first hour. The national parks are $2.5 billion a year, and much of that is recovered from entrance fees, hiking permits, camping permits, concessions, and everything. And yet, that was the first thing to get cut. They didn't touch the military spending at all. They didn't touch the spending going into the NSA, and they certainly have not stopped the trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars being poured into Wall Street to prop up that banking system.
Well, that little rinky-dink airport, supposedly, they were going to modify it to the extent that it could handle large military aircraft.
Okay.
Now, I don't know what we need with them here. There's two military, there's two Air Force bases within 50 miles from here. Now, when do we need that? We need the hospital. And like I said, the money they've wasted, they've stopped. They haven't done anything out there on that project in, I don't know, 6 months. That's probably as far as they'll ever go. They've probably spent whatever money they got, and everybody's got their palms greased. And now, if you get injured, you've got to drive 35 miles to an emergency room. I mean, how much longer is people going to put up with this? Why aren't there riots in the streets already?
Well, there have been peaceful protests, which we encourage, but of course they get ignored both by the government and the corporate media. Look how they were trying to spin the protest this last weekend. The veterans, the truckers, the anti-Monsanto protest, and people are basically saying they're realizing voting and protesting doesn't work anymore because we are in a dictatorship that is supported by massive vote fraud. And at some point, there's going to be a breaking point where people are going to choose nonviolent options. I'm hoping to put that off as long as I possibly can, because I think the whole system's going to come crashing down all by itself in the immediate future. And, of course, we know the government is prepared to deal with a violent uprising. That they know how to deal with. What this government doesn't know how to deal with is millions of Americans standing up and shouting to the rest of the world, we're not going to be the wallets of last resort for Wall Street anymore. We don't support the wars. We know this government is lying to the world. That they don't know how to deal with. That's why you've got Jay Rockefeller out there saying, the Internet should never have been invented. They don't like the fact that they can't lie to us with impunity anymore.
Well, I don't know. It's hard to get information, but I suspect this little ridiculous deal about our hospital, I suspect there's nothing unique about it. I suspect there's situations like that all over this country.
Oh, absolutely there are hospitals being closed. We've had a bunch of hospitals closed down here in Hawaii. In fact, we actually used one of them as a location for Lost. Complete hospital, just sitting there, empty. And a lot of the funding for these regional airports has to do with making them convenient for some political figure who doesn't want to go through the big commercial airports and get his crotch grabbed by the TSA. A lot of these military airfields are built at taxpayer expense, and then they're turned around and leased to like FedEx, which uses a lot of these small military fields for their planes to keep them out of the commercial airspace and reduce congestion.
I have a hope that if this bongo here is actually imposed as it's written, it will be the turning point, because people's going to be paying so much for insurance that can pay it, and other people just won't have any.
And they'll get hit by these IRS fines. It's a cash grab. This is not about your help. This is a cash grab, and they're going to follow it up with the carbon tax, despite the hard winter coming in. They're still trying to sell this idea that global warming causes hard winters, which is absolute, complete nonsense, and it betrays the fact that the government and the corporate media really do think every American is a complete moron, a product of public education. Like after we leave public schools, we don't go out and read and study on our own to learn what's really going on with the world. And it is, and I'm actually surprised we haven't seen riots to this point, but part of that might be the fluoride in the drinking water, which is a tranquilizer.
And well, I guess I better go, but something that gripes me, this local newspaper we got, which is it's not a newspaper, it's just a propaganda rag for local politicians, You can't get really any information. And I've heard the hospital went out of business because the people bought it and ran it to the ground and stole all the money and now all these rigmarole, man. If government is so inefficient, it can't get that hospital open. I mean, how can anybody have any faith in it?
It has nothing to do with running the hospital. This whole privatization is about letting private, for-profit corporations take over what should be public utilities. including the roads, the water, the currency, obviously, was the first one, and hospitals. They're all turned into for-profit operations, and as long as disease is a profit opportunity in this country, we will not have a healthy society. It's inevitable as an epiphenomenon of that incestuous little deal between money and health care. Got to let you go here. Coming up on another commercial break, and I got a whole bunch of...
Everybody have a nice day.
All right, thank you very much here, and we're going to switch over real quick to Bob in Las Vegas. Aloha, Bob. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, how's it going, Mike? Hey, you know what? I hope we don't have riots, man, because I live here in Las Vegas, and not only do people have more than likely automatic weapons, but I know for certain that the police department here has fully automatic weapons, and they'd be blown up.
All the police are being armed with fully automatic weapons, armored personnel carriers, and they're being given all the tools for riot control. They're being taught to think of hungry, starving Americans as zombies. So they'll just mow them down by the hundreds without thinking about them, the way they called the Vietnamese the gooks and the Middle Eastern people the Hajjs, and it's part of that dehumanization process. So they're getting ready to put down a mass violent revolution in this country, which is why it is absolutely the last thing we should ever do. But what we should be doing is standing up and just screaming to the rest of the world, we, the people of the United States of America, don't agree with or support or consent to what is going on in this government and financial system, and we will not allow history to collectively demonize us for the crimes of this government, the way history demonizes all Germans for the crimes of the Nazis. Now, Bob, we're coming up on a commercial break. You can go on talking, but I'm going to have to cut you off, but I'm going to keep you through the break, so don't get panicked and everything. What else did you want to talk about?
I have a question about a video I seen on YouTube last night regarding the credit rating of our country, about the AAA rating.
Hello?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah, okay, please continue.
About the AAA credit rating, allegedly from what this video I've seen, that if we get lowered from another company, I believe it, whatever one happened before that...
I think it was Standard & Poor's.
Standard & Poor's. Okay, so allegedly if this is Moody's or Fitch, that they lower us to beneath the AAA rating, for any country to hold our bonds, that it would be illegal for them. Is that so?
No, it's not illegal for them to lower the credit rating. And when we come back...
No, for countries to hold it as AAA.
That I don't know. We'll talk about it when we come back. Don't hang up. I'm going to come back to you, Bob. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking with Bob in Las Vegas, and I don't know what the laws are going to be in other countries, but in the United States of America, certain types of investments, primarily pension funds, are forbidden by law from purchasing any securities not rated AAA. And the reason for that is because pension funds are supporting retirees and elderly people who don't have time to rebuild their lives in the event of a failed investment. They can only go for these top-rated absolute AAA securities. That's how so many pension funds got destroyed during the 2008 mortgage-backed security fraud meltdown, because Wall Street's rating agencies had all said, these are AAA, you can buy them. These pension funds were buying these investments. They all fell apart. The pensions were defunded, and that's where all this brouhaha about public worker pensions costing too much comes from, because the people administering these pension funds and the state governors don't have the gonadal tissue to stand up and point the finger of blame where it so richly deserves to go. So that's what's going on with the law here in the United States of America. Now, if the U.S. loses its AAA rating, that means that pension funds will no longer be able to buy U.S. Treasury bonds. I don't think it means they have to divest of the ones they've already got. But it would also mean that the cost of borrowing for the United States of America would go up, which means the interest on newly acquired debt following the decline of the rating would be more costly for future generations. Okay, Bob?
Yeah, can I read this to you real quick?
Real quick.
It's just real quick. It's one paragraph. If the United States is not rated AAA by at least 2 of the 3 rating agencies, the United States Treasuries will be illegal to hold in some forms of collateral and in some banks as forms of allocation for risk-based capital. Basically, what this article is saying is if it's not... It's kind of like when someone does a credit report. If your credit is rated like 2 times bad, but of the 3, then it's bad. That's basically what it's saying. So, like you were saying with them using it for pensions and whatnot, it would be everything. It wouldn't just be that.
It would be a lot of things.
Everything. It would be total economic collapse. And all the people that are beckoning for a riot, I recommend you read some of that Rex 84 stuff and some of that Iron Mountain report, so you get a little hype to understand that when that happens, there is no Constitution. You don't have a Second Amendment. You don't have a First Amendment. You are cattle. And they'll do just like they did in Canada and other countries. They'll come down the street with a garbage truck and they'll just take your whatever it is and throw it into there.
Yeah, the U.S. government clearly is preparing to declare itself at war with the American people in the 50 states, and that's why
they've already done it.
We cannot.
They've already done it.
They've
already done it. It isn't that they have to declare it. They've already done it. As far as me and a lot of people in this country have seen it, closing down the Veterans Memorial. Really? Are you kidding me? That's theirs. That's theirs. That's like someone just walking into your house and using your bathroom. You don't do that. That's disrespectful in so many forms.
Mm-hmm.
I could go in so many hours on this, Mike, but yeah, disgusting. That's all I could say.
All right, well, thanks a lot. We're going to let you go here because we got a lot of callers waiting on the line here. But the very worst mistake that we, the American people, can commit is to fight the war the U.S. government is already prepared to fight and win. We have to stay outside the box. This revolution is taking place virtually on the internet, in cyberspace, in the blogosphere, however you want to call it. This revolution is not being fought with muskets, cannon, or rockets. It's being fought with keyboards. And right now we're winning. We're absolutely winning because this government has lost the trust of the American people and the rest of the world, and that is a government that cannot function. And that's why they're thrashing around trying to keep their little party going as long as they can. And they're going to go on taking from you, the American people, until you, the American people, are completely tapped out, or you slap them across the face and say no more. But the rigidity of the U.S. military structure means that they're organized and designed to fight the last revolution rather than be able to adapt to what's coming up now. And that's why so many popular insurrections do succeed in history. They're fighting a military that is indoctrinated to fight the previous war. And again, do not initiate violence against the government, but prudence demands you be prepared to protect your home, your family, and what's left of your wealth when the government initiates violence against you. George in Texas. Aloha, George. Thank you for waiting. What's on your mind today?
How you doing, Mike?
Doing fine.
Well, you know, I took that USDA letter. There wasn't a freak out or anything, but I made about 100 copies. I went down to the grocery store, and I put up a little sign for EBT card holders. And I'll tell you one thing, when I passed out that letter, people's buying habits really changed. I'm not really people buying steak and all that stuff, but you know, the thing is, I was even telling them, you got to buy the most for the cheapest. It means buy a lot of rice and all that stuff, and lay away from the DiGiorno pizzas and all that stuff. Because I just want to sort of like make them have enough supply that they're not going to go out and riot after November or freak out.
Well, supposedly, if this debt deal gets clinched by the end of the day, EBT will release the money to the states. And again, I don't think they were planning on cutting off the food stamp money next month because it would trigger nationwide riots that could rapidly spin out of control. This was political theater to get all the food stamp recipients, all these people dependent on the government for their next meal, to call up the Congress and say, raise the debt ceiling. I don't care how much you enslave future generations. I'm going to be dead and gone by then. Make it their problem, not my problem. And that was just part of the political theater.
Well, it's also financial terrorism.
You know, if you really think about it, right now Barack Obama is in violation of the USA Patriot Act, because the USA Patriot Act defines as an act of terror threats to the well-being of people in order to force a change in their political point of view. That certainly seems to be what this food stamp stunt did.
Well, they're also saying cut off Social Security payments.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, the thing is, and everybody goes, oh, we're going to be broke and all that stuff. But you know, the thing is, 87% of the government is still running. And that's the part of government we don't want.
That's exactly right.
And the thing is, I even called Congressman Weber's office, John Cornyn's office. I said, I want the bureaucracy stripped down to a skeleton crew. Even the TSA reduced to one guy per airport, being just a door greeter. You know what I mean?
Yeah, now that Walmart doesn't have greeters anymore, they can all go to work for the TSA. Hi, get on the airplane, have fun.
Yeah, I want the bureaucracy stripped down to a skeleton crew.
I want the federal government to go back to its pre-Civil War small size. That's what I want. Lincoln wanted the same thing. That's why they shot him. One of the reasons they shot him.
But the thing is, I think Obama really overreached. I really think he's not going to last this term. And personally, I'm not for a military coup, but to keep Obama out of the way of Congress, they got to impeach. I wouldn't mind the president being put under house arrest in Chicago.
In Detroit. In Detroit. Let's send him to live in Detroit.
No, but even the bankers, Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan Chase. I mean, I'm not saying arrest them, but I'm just saying the military should place them all under house arrest until you investigate, while they investigate the financial crimes committed. I'm not for arrest or a coup, but I wouldn't mind a bunch of people being placed under house arrest.
We know financial crimes are being committed, but back in the George W. Bush administration in 2008, they set as a national policy that Wall Street was not going to be investigated for the mortgage-backed security fraud. They were not going to be prosecuted. They were not going to be arrested, because to do so would harm the reputation for trustworthiness of the American banking system. Obviously, that did not work, but that is the current policy. You know, they're going to go after the street criminals and the guys stealing a loaf of bread to feed their family, but bankers stealing trillions of dollars, except for Bernie Madoff, they got off scot-free. We got to take a break for commercials. Back with more phone calls after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones here. I know we got a bunch of people waiting online. We're going to start with Jerry in Chicago. Aloha, Jerry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Hey, something I wanted to mention, and you had a caller call in at the top of the last hour, and he was saying about, martial law and everything else like that. Wouldn't you say that we're in a soft version of martial law with all of these different events going on and all these certified respondents that are going to participate in it having to be trained by September 28th with sidearm, 12-gauge, AR-15, not to mention the deployment of all of the meals ready to eat, all of the water, all of the CDC drugs and vaccines, not to mention how they closed a lot of the ports for commercial fishermen so they can't even go out there and fish, make a living, which is going to affect our food chain eventually.
No, I mean, I would say right now we're already in a soft dictatorship. It's a dictatorship trying to pretend that it is not a dictatorship, and what they're getting ready to do is do the transition where they're going to stop wasting all this time and money trying to convince the American people that we live in a free society and say, well, those conspiracy kooks were all right. It really is a tyranny here, and give us your guns and your children and your gold.
Well, they're not getting mine. So as much as I'd like to be as peaceful about this as possible and have a restoration rather than a revolution, I think it's geared more and more in that direction every day.
I'm afraid you are correct. I'd like a restoration, but just how violent the transition is going to be is entirely up to the federal government.
Yeah, I don't think I could stand there and turn the other cheek, because I don't think they're going to leave me with a cheek to stand with.
Probably not.
So, all right, Michael, thank you very much. Keep up the good work, buddy.
All right, thank you. We're going to switch over to Dave in Sacramento. Aloha, Dave. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Mike, I'd like to talk about one aspect of why our government is growing authoritarian. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're on the air.
Okay. In the military, we used to have people called lifers. Are you familiar with that term?
Yeah, the career military officers.
No. There's a difference between a lifer and a career, okay? A lifer is a person who cannot function outside a military base. Okay, they are very authoritarian people. They have this aura of power around them that they cannot superimpose on any civilian type of operation, any civilian job, any civilian environment.
Okay.
Okay.
I was unaware of that distinction, by the way.
Is that they retire, and where do they go? They go into the government. They go into positions which they can continue exercising authority. Okay, and this is not the type of authority that you would want in a civilian environment, but that's what they do, is they build the perimeter fence of a military base around a civilian environment. And I think that's one aspect of our growing authoritarian government, is the fact that many of these employees, in FEMA and the FAA and organizations like that are lifers. They have to go into the government jobs, the authoritarian jobs, because they can't function outside in a civilian environment where people can basically tell them to shove it when they start, behaving the way they did in the military.
That's an interesting analysis. That's very interesting. I'm going to have to think about that for a while. Yeah, right. That does sound like it indeed could be a major factor. Where government is self-perpetuating and self-growing, all governments tend toward oligarchy. But I think the reason our government is going authoritarian at this particular time is their growing recognition that the American people are now on to all the lies and deception and fraud going back 100 years used to start these wars. More and more Americans are now aware that the economic system that we're living under and enslaved to is not the one this nation was started with. And it's not about serving the people. It's about looting the people to make the bankers and the politicians rich. And that does not sit well with those of us who were raised with the history of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Okay.
All right, we're going to switch over to Scott in Wisconsin. Aloha, Scott. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mikey, just checking in. Mikey, first of all, I wanted to just tip my hat to that caller down there in Alabama. Hang in there, buddy. I know what is going on when you have a hospital closed or a school nowadays. Mikey, I got something to encourage you that I saw yesterday. We had a mall closed downtown in my city I live. And anyways, they dug a hole in the parking lot. So I went by the other day and asked, what's this new building going up? A bank?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, where the money are you going to get to build another bank when we got so many banks closing? It's just the puppetry. But, Mike, I wanted to share this with you and encourage other people to do this. Last night I went on an errand. And I said, I want to chase down the cops. And I drove around town and drove it downtown, and I couldn't find one. And then finally I went down the main stretch, and I did see two side-by-side parked. And I got out of the car, parked, and got out, and walked up, and he put his window down. He says, can I help you? And I said, well, how you doing? He shook my hand. And I sat there for 40 minutes talking, are you going to stand with we the people?
Mm-hmm.
And that cop got emotional. And we talked about the situation of out east, and he was stunned. He was shocked. And he sat there, and he mentioned something about the Bilderbergs, which was a miracle from a cop.
Mm-hmm.
But the other cop, he had his ear out the window listening.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, I want to ask you a question. Which way are you going to stand should there be riots in the street coming and all this? He never really answered, Mike, but I could see him get emotional.
Mm-hmm.
But he did say one thing to me that what I was encouraged. He could sense that something was going to happen out east. So I just want to encourage everybody to don't be afraid to go to your officer sometime when they're sitting and just open up a conversation with them and tell them you love them. But clearly, I'm not saying all the cops out here, Mikey, are out to kill people. But this was encouraging to him and me. And you know what? He shook my hand when I left. And he also gave me the captain of the police department, which I'm going to be talking to. So just pray for me.
Mm-hmm.
But you guys got to go out. You got to talk. Have a relationship with the law enforcement of your local. Be encouraged. And just share some of the stuff that we've been talking about. Because a lot of them are still in the blindness of knowing this stuff.
Well, you're absolutely.
So I just wanted to call and share that with you, Mikey. And thanks for taking my call. I'll let you get other callers going on. But I wanted to say something about George, too. George has got the right idea, though, with going in and buying storage food like rice and that stuff. So good job, George. Thanks a lot, Michael, and keep up the good work and be safe, brother.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Yeah, as a general rule of thumb, you should have 3 months' worth of long-term storable, not requiring refrigeration food, whether it's freeze-dry or dry goods or whatever, and water, because that's what you're going to run out of first. to deal with the coming dark times. Now, as far as talking to the police, we're very lucky here in Hawaii. The local Hawaiian police are very mellow. There have been no problems or violence with the various Occupy movements and protest marches out here. It's not always true with police on the mainland, especially the ones who are juiced up on SSRIs. But in addition, the time has definitely come for us to stop talking amongst ourselves and start to evangelize the truth to other segments of society. And the police are one of them, and also what remains of the middle class. Because a lot of the people who are still doing well in this country are still living in a state of denial that somehow it's all going to work out. And what you need to get out there and talk to these people who are still doing well and saying, well, look how the United States has been looting the poor and working class, because now the poor and working class are absolutely tapped out. Who do you think the government's going to come after next? They're going to be coming after the upper middle class to get whatever wealth they need to keep this Ponzi scheme going. And it's time for the middle class to be aware of the situation and pick a side. Which side do they want to be on? With the American people trying to restore the republic, or are they going to go on blindly following a government that will turn on them in a moment and strip their wealth from them to keep this little Ponzi scheme going again? All righty, let's see. Going to switch over here to Kyle in Philadelphia. Kyle, welcome back to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Yeah, and everyone can take this for what it's worth, but I grew up on the main line just outside Philadelphia. It's a very affluent place. About 5 of my friends that I went to grade school or high school ended up on Wall Street. I still have pretty good contact with them, one of which sells stocks and bonds and commodities to hedge funds.
Okay, Kyle, I'm going to have to put you on hold. We're going to come right back to you after these commercial words, so don't hang up. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and we are talking with Kyle in Philadelphia about the economy. And Kyle, could you just sort of pick up where you left off?
Yeah, so one of my real good buddies that I still am in very regular contact with works for a company that sells hedge funds, commodities, stocks, bonds, whatever they choose to investing in. He's worked there since he was out of college. And in 2008, he wasn't half of the level where he was today. He was risen pretty quickly. And, I don't want to say didn't see it coming, but didn't understand the workings of it. Well, I've had a long conversation with him over the past 2 weeks, back and forth through text messaging, and he's never seen an exodus. Nobody is buying. Nobody is buying stocks. Nobody is buying bonds. Everybody is selling. Everybody is getting out. Everyone's taking their money and they are running. His statement to me was between now, meaning last week, and 1 year from now, if this keeps up, we will not have a stock market. It will not be a relevant factor in
it's already not relevant, because we know the soaring heights of the stock market are completely disconnected from the economy of the majority of Americans. And people who are selling their bonds and stocks right now, they're being snapped up by the plunge protection team and the Wall Street banks in order to protect their existing investment portfolios, because they're so bought into the stock market to keep it propped up that any significant downturn will render them instantly insolvent. And so I understand small investors are getting out right now because they know the market's overvalued. But they're just going to keep the stock market as part of the window dressing, because it's a great political banner. Look, the economy's doing great. The Dow is at record high. And, of course, to the guy on the street who just lost his job and he's facing foreclosure, what the stock market is doing is completely irrelevant to his life.
Well, and the whole commodities, especially gold and silver and whatnot, what a lot of these Wall Street companies do is they don't sell physical gold, they sell paper gold. And the amount of paper gold that they are selling, there could never be. They probably sold 10 times in paper gold the amount of actual gold that there is on the face of the earth.
I heard it's 50 to 1. I heard it's up to they leveraged it 50 to 1, And they use the paper contracts overselling to keep the price of gold down, because for some bizarre reason, they'll take the current price of the paper contracts, blend it with the price of actual physical, and say, oh, the gold prices are down. Don't leave the stock market. Don't close your bank account. You don't want to go into gold. It's just... But they've been treating it as a reserve currency, which is not what gold was ever supposed to be used for. And, yeah, I think the last I heard was that these gold brokerages have oversold the physical gold by something like 50 times.
Well, and things like gold, I mean, that's being artificially suppressed. But works of art, antique furniture, anything that will hold a certain amount of value. I mean, these are what the money people, the people who have real serious money are buying. They're paying $100 million for a painting, and they're paying $50,000 for, a chair. Because at some level, the money isn't going to be worth anything. But in 10, 20, however many years, when you come through the other side, supposedly what you put your money into, that will still hold some sort of value.
I would be very careful, because unless you're buying an authenticated Picasso or Da Vinci, art prices can be ephemeral, and yes, the auction houses love the prices to go sky high to keep pumping it up. But there are a lot of art critics out there saying that the vast majority of art being bought as an investment is already overpriced. This is why when we tell people to buy silver and gold, we tell them stay away from the numismatically valuable coins, because that valuation is very ephemeral. It's very subjective. And it can rise and fall based on popularity. If for ideological reasons Picasso is declared to be, so last century, and the new trend is ultra-realism, the people can take a real bath on that. Hard metals and tangible assets, silver, gold, tantalum, platinum, those are all good things to put your money into. You've got to be very, very careful dealing in the fine art world or fine furniture world, because there's a great deal of fraud out there. And again, there is no guarantee you'll get your money back. You have to know what you're doing out there. It's like buying and selling gemstones. If you don't know what you're doing, you're going to get cleaned.
And I would certainly never encourage anybody who's on a fixed budget to do anything like that. The main purpose of this phone call is basically to let the audience know, and they can take it for whatever it's worth. But people who work on Wall Street, and my friends, the people that I know, the people that I have personal history with who work on Wall Street, have pretty much said to me that between now, meaning a week ago, and 1 year from now, it's not going to be the same. There's absolutely going to be, call a collapse, call it an implosion.
That's a safe bet here, and we know that a lot of these Wall Street brokerage firms are letting people go by the hundreds, because the small traders, the day traders, they're all going away and pulling out of it, and all the stock market activities, basically these gigantic block buys by the high-speed computer trading systems and institutional buyers, the small investors have already bailed out, and that's actually a good thing, because they won't be caught in the crash. It's not going to be like 1929, where elevator operators and taxi cab drivers had their life savings invested in the stock market and got wiped out. This crash is going to hit primarily the money junkies, who will scream to Washington, D.C. for another bailout, and Washington, D.C. will tell America, we have to bail out the bankers again to preserve their reputation for trustworthiness and respectability, blah, 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 blah.
Wall Street is basically, right now, a gigantic money laundering organization.
Mm-hmm.
And it's taking fake fiat currency and converting them into real things. Land, gold, whatever you want to call it. But that's essentially what they're doing. And when they get to a point when they say, okay, people who we want to be out and protected are out and protected. Everybody else, good luck, pull the plug. Don't, last one out, turn the lights off.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. All righty, we got to let you go because we're coming up on the top of the hour. We've got a long-distance caller I want to get to. Ahmet in Germany. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Ahmet in Germany, are you there? Okay, I guess he must have dropped or we lost the connection, so we'll switch over to Dan in Washington. Aloha, Dan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Dan, are you there? Okay, I guess we had some callers drop, or we're having problems with our phone system again.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
This Dan?
Yeah.
Dan, what's on your mind?
I'm just wondering, where is the empathy for your fellow man gone? I'm so tired of hearing these people talk about all the lazy bums on welfare and blah, blah. Why is it so hard for people to grasp there's 90 million people out of the workforce, all the outsourcing, all the attack on small business? I was just exchanging comments with a guy on a blog site saying, people think opening a small business is beneath them, and, they're too lazy to do it, and, like, they're just handing out small business loans like candy, and everybody's got $10,000 in the bank to open a small business, and what is wrong with people?
Well, what you're dealing with...
Of course, there are scammers out there. There isn't everything, but... These people that sit there and constantly, it just drives me nuts. All they're doing is feeding into the divide and conquer mindset that they want you to feed into. That's what, the more the government puts these people on these systems by design, I mean, what are they supposed to do? Look at their kids and say, sorry, we got to starve today.
Whoops. Okay, Dan,
I can't find a job, but...
Okay, Dan, I'm sorry, I have to cut you off. We have to take a break for Phil Shapley and news. I'll respond to you when we come back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And responding to Dan, I think most Americans have a great deal of empathy for the victims of this monetary system here. But the spin coming out of the corporate media and certainly from the money junkies there's a couple of things behind it. First of all, like any other addict, addicts will not accept responsibility for the harm their addiction causes to those around them. They'll make excuses. And people who've become fabulously wealthy by gaming the systems cannot look in a mirror and say what they're doing is immoral or wrong or even illegal. And that's where this blame the victim situation comes from. And they're not just money junkies. We say sometimes with rapists, she deserves it. She dressed sexy. And it's a way of basically ducking the blame and guilt for what you're doing. And there's a huge amount of that going on right now. Secondarily, the U.S. government certainly has an agenda of wanting to destroy sympathy and support for the homeless and the hungry among the American people as a way of deterring a possible public outcry, if not uprising. And that's the reason behind all of it. And we know it's just all a bluff. We know the money junkies and their private central bank are the cause of all of this evil. We know that those people out there in those food lines do not deserve to be there. Are there lazy people gaming the system? Yeah. And not just at the low end of the economy. Look at the high end of the economy. These people aren't working hard. They've gamed the system to bring themselves fabulous wealth without having to give anything back to society. Are there scammers? Yes, and again, at both ends of the economic spectrum. But this idea of just dismissing the homeless and hungry and jobless as being lazy. There are no jobs out there, and the situation is being made worse by this tendency to just allow the illegals to come pouring into the country, making the situation even worse. Now then, before we go back to the phones here, I have been notified by the very generous management of Republic Broadcasting that the next 5 callers will receive a free month's access to the RBN archive. So when I am done talking to you, do not hang up. Stay on the line, because Dan the man is now in our control room. He'll get on the phone with you and give you the access code so you get a free month's access to the archives. Don't hang up when I'm done with you, and we're going to start with Nosium in the Netherlands. Aloha, welcome back to the show. And what is on your mind this time?
Well, it's nothing that's on my mind this time. It's this is going around like 65 years. 65 years, and we still keep increasing the debt level. We're still increasing the debt level for 65 years.
Are you talking about in the Netherlands? Because here in the United States it's been going on for 100 years.
That's what I mean. It is for 100 years.
Yes, because the private central bank is a Ponzi scheme.
Oh my God!
And
100 years.
And it's a Ponzi scheme because the only way they can get it to work is to always find a new, larger population of brand new borrowers to allow the creation of money, part of which is siphoned off to pay the interest on the old money. And that's why when they talk about the growth of the economy, what they're talking about is the increase in the total aggregate debt on the population. And they use the word growth because it sounds like it's a good thing, but it isn't. It means, okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I thought it was like 6 years.
No,
100 years. Well, I say to you, congratulations.
For what?
Congratulations to you.
Oh, okay. Well,
you are 100 years.
Yeah. Well, I'm not ready to haul out the birthday candles.
1914 to 2014.
This is 2013. We're not quite to 20.
Going to 14.
Well, that'll be 101 years. No, I've got to let you go, and don't forget to stay on the line because Dan is going to give you the access code for 1 month's access to the RBN archives. I'm going to switch over to Art in. I guess you're off the grid. Art, is that you?
Yes, sir. That'd be me.
All righty. What's on your mind today?
Well, first of all, I want to say, Scott, I believe it was, thanks for the kudos yesterday. You two always have excellent points whenever you call in, as do, well, I would dare say 99% of everyone who calls into RBN.
We have a very intelligent, perceptive audience here, and yes, we get the occasional shill coming in to try and mess things up, but by and large, we've got a really sharp audience out there.
Oh, man, you bet. You know, Mike, let's have a real conversation here about this circus in Washington. I've been watching this craziness for the past 16 days now, and I've noticed that it's the same people with the same lame arguments on both sides of the aisle every single day.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the things I love to do is I love to just simply plant the seed, sit back, and watch it grow. As a farmer, I can appreciate the concept. Now, when you plant the seed in a human, in a person, or, you know, and you watch that seed grow, it's a beautiful thing. And the people around here, now, there is a stereotype about hillbillies being ignorant and without a clue and can't see past the plow because the horse's ass is blocking the view. But that's not necessarily the case, because these hillbillies around here, I'm hearing two very specific conversations taking place. The first one is they're talking today about, you know, this supposed agreement, the supposed deal that's going to fund the government up until January 10th or whatever, and raise the debt ceiling until February 17th. And virtually everybody I hear is saying the same thing. What? We're going to get to January 10th and January 17th, and we're going to be doing the same song and dance all over again.
Exactly right. That's exactly right. I mean, it's amazing. We're seeing all the members of Congress and the White House dancing around saying, we did absolutely nothing. We're still enslaved to the Federal Reserve. We still have the wars. We still have debt, and the American people think we did something good.
Yep. But then the second argument that pops up is there's always that one character in the group, and I love it because I've been planting seeds for a year since I've been living here. I moved here a year ago, and I've been planting seeds every time I talk to people. And this one guy looks up, he says, well, that's if we get that far. And all of a sudden I'm going, yeah, I want to hear what's coming next. So he gets into this little document I shared with everybody the other day that was delivered to me about, you know, the benefits that are filed generally around the 15th of every month. It's called SNAP.
Yes.
Being suspended until further notice, which means that there is likely going to be an awful lot of people aren't going to get their SNAP benefits next month.
It's not just SNAP. The Section 8 publicly supported housing did exactly the same thing, saying they're going to be out of money next month unless there's a debt ceiling increase.
And WIC and all of this. And then all of a sudden the discussion morphs into, well, yeah, that's right around the 15th, but ain't we got the GridX coming up on the 13th? And then now he says, yeah. He says, Art, what was it you were telling me the other day? I said, well, we know that every time we see a so-called drill, a simulation, there tends to be something real happens. I said, what's to say come the 13th when the so-called simulation, where they're actually not going to shut the grid down, they're just going to simulate the grid being shut down. What's to say some idiot doesn't flip the wrong damn switch and everything does go down, and then they can't get it back up?
Well,
now,
they'd have to have somebody to blame for it, like those gosh darn Iranian, Syrian, Russian, Chinese terrorists or something like that. We know that every one of these false flag terror attacks took place over top of a drill simulating that very exercise, and then suddenly it goes live, and the news media goes, oh, we've got to go to war, we've got to go to war. Listen, speaking of going, Art, I got to let you go. We've got to take a commercial break. We've got a ton of phone calls on here, and Art, don't hang up, because Dan is going to come on and give you your access code for a free month's access to the RBN archive. So just hang on the phone. Dan will be right with you. We got to take a break for commercials, and we will be right back. America, welcome back to the show here. We're going to go right back to the phones. Ahmed in Germany, aloha, welcome to the show. And when we're done talking, do not hang up, because you have won 1 month's free access to the RBN archives. What's on your mind today?
Aloha, Mike.
Yes.
Aloha.
Yes, aloha.
Okay. Mike, first of all, I would like to compliment you on your sense of humor. It made me just longer than 1 minute laugh. May I repeat the phrase?
Which phrase was that?
If I don't fondle your vice pres, the terrorist will win.
Well, I didn't write that joke. The U.S. government did.
Mike, you are great. I learned a lot from you, and I'm listening for a very long time, the first time I'm calling. First of all, I used to think that all the wars are for oil. Then you opened my eyes that it is for the dollar to keep it world reserve currency. But something else there is in my mind. Have you read the Protocol of Elders of Zion?
Yes, I have, and I know it seems to show a lot of what's going on, but it's pretty much presumed at this point to have been a propaganda fake. And I know a lot of people send it to me, but I know the Catholic Church has denounced it, and it doesn't make sense that people who were engaging in this kind of covert attempts to overthrow the world would actually write down in a document what they're doing, as opposed to simply getting together out there at the local pub or the local golf course and just saying this is what's going to work for us. I think a large part of what we're seeing is not a deliberate global plan as much as an epiphenomenon of all these individual competing agendas of greed and power.
True. Just this was the messenger who was taking it that struck down with the lightning or something, and you know that Henry Ford used to publish it and give it free. And if anybody said this is not, this is forgery or something, said it matches with the things going on.
Yeah, it does. It does match with what's going on. There's no question about that. And, Henry Ford had a lot of attitudes that were not well loved by the moneyed class, even though because of his automobile he became rich himself. One of my favorite Fordisms is that the best way to become prosperous is to make the community around you prosper. And he lived his life and organized his business along those lines. But for the money junkies who think they're supposed to have it all and the workers have none, of course, Ford was not very popular at all.
Of course. And another thing is, a couple of days ago, I was looking at YouTube. The Queen's advisor, Evelyn Rothschild, saying that the world currency will be a good thing and the thing. I think they are on their way. But another thing I wanted to... May I have another comment?
Yeah, one more comment real quick, though, because we got a lot of callers to get through before the end of the show.
Okay. You always talk about the Zimbabwe dollar, that it is now 1 million, 1 trillion. You know that Mugabe was knighted by Her Majesty Queen, the ultimate parasite. You know that. 1994, I think, when he asked for the confiscated farmlands to be given back to the Zimbabwe, said we need it. From then on, they crashed the country's economy.
Yes.
It was okay till then.
Yeah, they don't tap that shoulder, that sword on your shoulder without a really hefty price tag involved.
Yes, 100%. And Mike, thank you very much. Oh yes, one more thing, Mike. Did you know that in 1985 there was a guy who made a car ran with water, and it was on the American TV, on English TV. And suddenly they poisoned them in the Pentagon, and all died down, and they put the invention to shelves. You know anything about it?
I'm not familiar with that particular case here, but I'll take a look into it. We do have to let you go. Do not hang up. Okay. Dan is going to come on and give you the access code for your free month's access to the RBN archives. And we're going to switch over to Kathy in Massachusetts. Kathy, thank you for waiting. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I wanted to refer back to 3 callers back, I believe he was now, who was angry about the judgmentalism. And it's not just the corporate media. I actually had quite difficulty listening to some of the RBN hosts, many of them, because they go there into that judgmental mode. And I wanted to say, if you haven't walked the walk, don't judge. Karma's a real, negative, can bite you in the rear end. If I was not educated, attractive, articulate, and assertive, confident. My mother was a professor. My father was a professional. If I didn't have the background I have, my mother's research skills taught to me, I would never have survived this ordeal.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, not everyone has. If you take any one of those things from me, I would never have survived. And I think he may have heard perhaps Mr. Traficante, who did apologize. But I appreciate you bringing, the correction yesterday to him in your interview. People working under the table, and I don't work under the table, I try to live as ethically as possible in the situation that I'm in, being priced out of the healthcare market. Even 6 years ago, it was suicide for me to go back to work. I worked a full day for a major corporation in Seattle, and I said, oh, this doesn't get me into any trouble here, but I said to him, I said, I got the insurance data when I came in, and I said, I'm on Medicaid in Washington State, and I said, if you process this today that I work today, I said I just called, before I clocked in, I called the insurance company, and the insurance that you offer, the best plan, will cost more than my take-home wage just to pay the premium and my prescription copays, the basic rudimentary survivable things for type 1 diabetic stuff. And he looked at me and he said, oh, you're type 1 diabetic. He said, you can't afford to work. And I said, I know. And I said, but if you process this ASA, I said, they'll take my Medicaid. And I said, and I would have had to live without insurance for 90 days to even be offered the plan that would have left me homeless, working full-time for a major corporation, and foodless, okay? So Mr. Traficante might not realize that even volunteer work, when you're on Medicare, Medicaid, even volunteer work, that's considered unethical. You can't do it. That's grounds to lose your health care. So this cost of exorbitant, the health care system, the old system, I know the Obamacare is a problem. Trust me, I don't support that. We know, people like me, we know we're in the boiling water. We're hot, and we don't get respected. We get judged and urinated on by many of these conservative hosts, right? And Savage, I love Savage, some things he says, not all. He's one of my favorite, but I tell you what, I would love to have coffee with him and some of these other conservatives, and I hope all of the other hosts in RVM that may be listening right now will wake up. We're some of the fiercest warriors and boldest truth tellers because we know we're screwed. No one's coming to our rescue. We know that.
Well, this gets back to what I was saying about the federal government having abandoned their obligation to maintain an overview of what is best for the nation. And we have all these little individual politicians serving their own agenda for their own backers, and it creates this incredibly obfuscated, complicated overlapping of laws and regulations, which is just filled with all these catch-22s that people get trapped in. And they're said, you're entitled to this, but not if you do this, and you have to do this on Tuesday, and it really is a messed up system. Again, for the Blueprint of New America, we need simplification. It's got to be simple. The people have to be able to understand what their government is doing. We cannot tolerate a government that hides behind complexity to carry out whatever their agenda is here. Kathy, we're going to let you go because we're on a commercial break. Do not hang up because Dan is going to come on the line and give you the access code for a free month access to the RBN archive. So, Kathy, stay on the line. Dan will be right here, and we will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go back to the phones. We've got a lot of callers to get through before the end of the show, rather. James in North Carolina. Aloha, James. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Yeah, Mike. Just one small tip I thought I'd pass along. You were mentioning that people should have a couple of months' supply of food on hand. And there's some very good websites, one in particular, activistpost.com, that will tell you what are the best foods that you can get at your local supermarket and what you should and should not buy in bulk, and what will store for a long time and what won't.
And, something you need to pay attention to, the expiration dates are basically when the food stops tasting as good. For some products like canned vegetable, you can actually go years past the X date and they're still good. Obviously, for canned dairy and canned meat, that does not apply, and you have to be very careful. If you go to the Republic Broadcasting website or my website, you will see banner ads for some of our very generous advertising supporters who sell these kinds of products. I know over at Sam's Club, I noticed about a month ago, they're selling these giant plastic tubs for like $120, $130 that have 30 days worth of freeze-dried meals inside, and I forget if it's a family of 2 or a family of 4. They're not selling too well, but obviously that would be something where you can just grab one, actually grab 3 and put them out there in your garage with your emergency preparations. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff out there, dry goods especially, and mostly water storage. And I'm rather surprised. I was going to our local hardware stores. Nobody seems to sell large volume water jugs. And that is something people definitely need to have on hand because you can go without food for a while, but if you're without water for like more than 3 days, you're in serious, serious trouble. Okay?
About 5 gallons. Thanks.
I'm sorry, you broke up then. Would you repeat that?
Oh. Yeah, no, I guess, were you talking about like 5-gallon water jugs? Those are available.
Yeah, well, nowhere around here. I have to drive all the way into Honolulu to get them, which I know doesn't sound like it's that far a drive, and it really isn't, but relative to living on Hawaii, yeah, it's a long drive. At least I think they're still available over there. Anyway, James, I'm going to let you go. We've got callers. James, do not hang up the phone because Dan is going to come on. You're the last caller who's going to get the free month's access to the RBN archives. So Dan is going to give you that access code as soon as I'm done talking with you. And we are going to switch over to Ralph in California. Aloha, Ralph. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
So the free access. Hey, Mike, I just missed the free access, huh? On the code there?
You might want to turn down your computer where you're listening so we're not getting the feedback.
Let me step out. I'm in a restaurant.
Oh, okay.
You go out there. Let me step out because there's too many people talking. Anyways, better?
Yes, much better.
Hey, no, I'm calling regarding a buddy of mine just texted me, and he's from Louisiana. He texted me, and I'm in California, that we're not going to be able to buy lead bullets anymore come January 1st. Just thought I'd let you know if you haven't heard that.
I heard that they're going to start requiring you to fill out a permit to buy ammunition the same way that you're buying guns, but I don't know about an actual ban on lead bullets. Are they talking back to that whole idea about using tungsten because it's friendlier to the environment?
Probably. Well, yeah, it's lead bullets I was reading, and it's according to Jerry Brown, our favorite governor. It's safe for the regarding hunting and all that. In case they shoot, kill, and the dead carcasses, whatever, and the animals happen to eat the dead carcasses, and therefore they're going to eat the lead, and therefore it's going to...
Boy, that's a bit of a reach. I think the reason the government wants you all to be using tungsten bullets is it's going to wear your gun barrels out very, very quickly. But in point of fact, while a tungsten bullet is a very effective anti-personnel round, it's lousy for hunting because it won't expand. And it is the expansion of that bullet on impact that carries the kinetic energy into the target and brings down that game. If anybody's out there hunting and shooting animals and doesn't track them down and take the carcass and eat it, I mean, that's just criminal. That's sinful.
Yeah, that's stupid.
Yeah, it really, really is. But
it's just a way of taking our rights away.
Yeah, it really is, but it's not working. It's not working.
Yeah.
Every time they scream more gun control, gun sales go right through the roof, and that's a very good thing right now. 80% of Americans own at least one firearm, and that, of course, is what is holding this government from just declaring martial law right now today and saying, all right, we're going to go out. We need all of your gold. We need all your silver. We have to give it to those poor, suffering bankers who are working so hard to keep this Ponzi scheme going. And that's exactly what it is.
They're doing God's work. They're doing God's work, you know that.
That's right.
Hey, real quick, do you know anything about Common Core? Your opinion on Common Core? Because I'm a parent.
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
It's a Catholic school, and they're adopting it.
Well, I don't know that they're adopting it so much as it's simply being forced on everybody who's a recipient of any government funding for education has to adopt Common Core, and it is very clearly about propagandizing the young, cutting them off from the literary classics that might actually get them to think about what's going on. They're replacing Tom Sawyer and Catcher in the Rye with government handouts on global warming. It absolutely is exactly the same thing the Nazis were doing with their schools, or the Soviet Union. And I'm not saying that our schools weren't propagandizing young people when I was in school, because they were, and I remember it and I recognize it, but this is taking it to a whole new level.
Yeah, see, the thing real quick, and then I'll get off the phone. We're not supposed to have nationalized federal control schooling. It's supposed to be all state and local.
Well, that's the way it was set up, but this government's grabbing power and authority to itself, and they get away with it because state legislators and state governors see their jobs as a stepping stone to the big promotion to Washington, D.C. They're not thinking about what's going on in their state. They're just going through the motions to show that they're reliable and they can be trusted by the powers that be because they want that big promotion to the federal government.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Mike, for your show. I do appreciate it and all the information you give.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to switch over to Ed in Pennsylvania. Aloha, Ed. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Ed, are you there?
No, this is Tom.
This is Tom in Pennsylvania. My mistake. What's on your mind?
Okay. Following up on, first off, what did the German guy, what was the joke that you told him? I couldn't understand what he said. Something about terrorists?
Well, it's sort of a catchphrase I use every time the government says that you've got to do something, and it's always ending with, or the terrorists will win. If you think the terrorists will win, if you question the private central bank, the terrorists will win. If you're not out there maxing out your credit cards to buy Christmas goodies, the terrorists will win. And it's actually a takeoff on something that George Bush actually said following 9/11, that, even though we should all be afraid and ready to go to war, that we must go on to that shopping mall. We've got to keep on spending money in the shopping malls or the terrorists are going to win. And he actually said that, so I've used it as a joke ever since.
All right. To follow up yesterday, you were talking about the crypto locker virus.
Mm-hmm.
I've had personal experience with it. Calling it a virus is just a way to call it, but it's really not. What this bug does is something your computer can normally do, which would be to encrypt your files.
Mm-hmm.
And what it's doing is, if this thing gets into your computer, it works behind the scenes. You don't know what's going on because it's invisible. It encrypts all of your files with 256-bit encryption. And once it's done all the damage, then it pops up and it shows you a message and says, hey, we've encrypted all your files. We have the key to unlock it. And unless you send us $300, you're not going to get all your files. And it does indeed lock your files. You cannot access them.
Yeah, and here's the question that I have to ask. If the NSA is really so good at scanning the computer networks and all of our computers, why have they not grabbed the guy who created CryptoLocker and sent him down to Guantanamo for a good waterboarding?
Because they probably are the ones doing it.
Could very well be. I mean, they're spying on their ex-girlfriends and lovers. Their very existence is illegal. This spy operation is unconstitutional. By default, the NSA are criminals, set free to prey upon the American people.
What I was calling was just to tell people, if anybody gets this thing, you can easily remove it by using system restore, but unfortunately when you do that, you remove all possibility of ever getting your files unlocked. They are unlocking them if you pay the ransom, because otherwise if they didn't, then people would put it on the internet and say, hey, don't give them anything because they're not unlocking it. But if you have, the only way to prevent this from happening is to make sure you have a full backup of everything, and then you take it offline, like a hard drive or a memory stick. Back up all your files, put them on some, put it away somewhere. Don't connect it.
All right.
Because if you do, this thing can encrypt your files. I don't want anybody to get hurt for this thing.
Well, I don't either. We got to let you go for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And I have a message for the NSA, and I know they're listening to my radio show, and they're monitoring my website here. And I'm hurling the defy. We already know you were lying about all these terror plots that you claim to have thwarted. It was absolute nonsense. You want to impress America with how good you are at spying on all the computer traffic, you go out and you find this guy who came up with CryptoLocker. And you get him arrested and sent to Guantanamo. Because if you can't, then we know that this has all been a multi-billion-dollar bluff to make us think you're watching everything that we're doing. But if you can't find the computer criminals who are doing CryptoLocker or any of the other malware that prowls around making our lives difficult and forcing us to buy computer security software we really don't want, then it only proves you are completely impotent and weak over and above my NSA challenges. So I'm daring you, NSA. Go out and find this guy. Make an example of him. I guarantee you, you grab one of these cyber criminals and you crucify him upside down in the public square, and the computer crime problem's probably going to start going away immediately thereafter. All righty, quick little news note before we go to our final phone call of the day. You've probably been hearing the Washington Redskins have been under tremendous pressure to change their name because people find it offensive. Oh, horror, the Washington Redskins, that's offensive. So we're getting late word that the team has agreed to remove the name Washington from their team name to save themselves further embarrassment as our government continues to do what the government is going to continue to doing. Okay, David in San Francisco. Aloha, David. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Michael, I'm glad you did that editorial about the NSA and the CryptoLocker. They still haven't put Michael Chertoff in prison yet. Of course, he was the one that owned shares in the naked underwear scanner that's at every airport, and he's the shill that talked us into buying it when he knew that it was all a setup from the front. So, yeah, organized crime runs Homeland Security and the NSA. That's a given. Hey, you know what I was interested in? Kind of along the same lines. Have you heard, Senator Cruz, his wife is vice president of Goldman Sachs, and she's actually got a massive territory. Her territory runs from Mississippi to New Mexico, includes Colorado, Texas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, massive territory. And the longer the shutdown went, the more that Goldman Sachs stood to make. So, this has all been a setup, that Goldman Sachs is a secret supporter of the shutdown of government, because if they ruin America's bond rating, they force us to have to pay higher dividends, higher premiums for our treasury notes and whatnot. So it's all been a setup, and, Senator Cruz is like a traitor as that goes.
Well, again, the problem that we have with the entire U.S. Congress, and we saw this back during the debate over TARP, is that members of Congress are very firmly tied in with the financial sector, and they make all of their decisions in Congress based on their own wallet and their own investment portfolio. And that's why, with the blueprint for the new America, I think anybody in a position of authority in the government, whether it's a senator, a representative, an appointed official, should all agree as a condition of holding office to have their entire wealth placed in a blind trust, and in order so that their decisions are not influenced by their own wallet. That's how we got TARP. 90% of Americans said do not use tax money to bail Wall Street out of its own stupidity, and Congress forced it through. They ran it through the Senate first, which is a violation of the Constitution, and then arm-twisted the House to go along with it. And they did it because they were protecting their own wealth on the backs of the American taxpayer. And we're seeing it again with all this this theater. Now, the president has his wealth in a blind trust, we think, we're told, but we know, at least certainly during the Clinton administration, that the Clintons actually kept a large part of their personal wealth out of the blind trust and were able to profit handsomely from all these decisions being made. And
well, you remember the business about they have the right to do insider trading while on the floor of the Congress. You know, that if they learn things in congressional inquiries and whatnot, it's legal for them to do insider trading.
Well,
so
technically, let's be correct here. Insider trading of any kind is illegal. It is simply not enforced with Congress. Now, Congress did look at a resolution to specifically say members of Congress cannot use what they have information in Congress to do their stock trades, but that was, of course, voted down because, yeah, when you're inside the Congress, you know who's going to get the big, tasty contracts before it's announced, and absolutely they're reaping millions and millions. I mean, look how wealthy members of Congress are. These are not representatives of ordinary America. They're lawyers. They've got inherited wealth, and their terms in Congress just fabulously enrich them. And that has got to stop. When the nation was started, all members of Congress were presumed to have livelihoods that paid their bills, and being in the Congress was a very poorly paid honorary position, and it was part-time. We did not have a permanent ruling class, and that was by intention.
It's interesting you mentioned that. There's a book I've picked up in an old yard sale. I think the book was written probably close to 100 years ago. It's called Famous Orations, and it has a nice one from Ben Franklin, and it's called On a Salaried Bureaucracy. And it talks specifically about not paying them. It's given that these people are wealthy to start, and that when you make bureaucrats paid, you're actually compounding the problem. And so it's a great little Ben Franklin. By the way, with the shutdown of government, they were shutting down our attorneys who were trying to sue these major banks. And I noticed today J.P. Morgan is settling in one of these massive lawsuits. And it's interesting because all of the attorneys on our side are laid off.
Yes.
They're not considered indispensable workers. So who was allowing this settlement to go through? This is either a PR piece that was allowed to show up late, or somebody did a settlement with J.P. Morgan for a simple $100 million.
Yeah, that's a wrist slap compared to what they made. And, yeah, I'm not surprised that they took advantage of the lawyers being furloughed, and probably some judge just rubber stamped this and said it's a done deal.
Because UBS had to pay $1.5 billion, and J.P. Morgan was just as guilty as all of them, and in fact, quite likely more. They were only highlighting this settlement in that it was good, in that they finally admitted that they had committed crimes, as opposed to having just a quiet settlement. So this confession to a crime for J.P. Morgan is at least one strike against them. But
well, you know, if I could walk into a bank and steal $1 million, and then the government says we'll ask for only 1,000 of it back if you confess, yeah, I'd be confessing, sure. Here's your $1,000, I did it, and take the other 900,000 and head on out and have a bunch of fun.
That's pretty much the ratio, because these guys, you know, you remember the subprime, that was billions, hundreds of billions. I think they said that the entire subprime totaled about $71 trillion, actually, $71 trillion.
That's exactly right. That's exactly
right. And the
right.
value of the entire Earth is said to be $24 trillion. So the subprime alone in America in 2008 was worth 3 times the value of the entire Earth. And if you can imagine that we don't get 10% of it back, then that means that these mortgages are still yet to be paid, which are valued at 3 times the value of the Earth.
Well, it's a simple mechanism. I mean, we've reached the point where Wall Street, they're never criminally prosecuted. So they just figure, all right, we're going to do a little scam here. We're going to make $2 billion. We'll probably have to pay a settlement of $1.5 million. It's just good business sense to go on out and scam the public. And that's exactly the reason why Wall Street is so completely out of control.
Yeah.
All right,
hey,
all right, yeah, I got to let you go. We're at the top of the show here, and I want to end, as they keep on screaming about, do we have a deal, do we don't, debt ceiling raise, why are they raising the debt ceiling at all? The Constitution gives the U.S. government the right to create and issue interest-free money Why are they borrowing money at interest from a privately owned central bank? It's all just ink and paper and numbers in a computer, and the government is doing it to sell you into the slavery of those private bankers in exchange for generous campaign contributions for the next election. And have you noticed how nobody in the corporate media has ever even mentioned this fact? It's a huge scam. The common enemy of all mankind are private central banks issuing the public currencies alone at interest. We got to get out of here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your generous support to Republic Broadcasting. We had a lot of stuff coming in here that we're really, really grateful for. We'll be back tomorrow. Until then, stay informed, make good choices. Aloha, America.